Hey there guys, how's it going? Adam here for another video, and today we're starting out our look at Innistrad Crimson Vow, and we're starting to start looking at the legends from the set. And I always say this is the best way to start these videos, I think, is to start looking at the legendaries that are actually in this set that you can actually pick out of packs, look at on EDH rank, whatever, and go, okay, cool, this is a commander that I might want to build around, or could build around, or could go really well in a deck, or whatever. So yeah, let's get into some of those cards here for today. Right, so we're going to start off with Angie, Miss Angie. I can't resist it. Miss Angie, Maid of Dishonor, 2 and Rakdos mana, 4 mana, 4/5, vampire. So whenever she or another one of or more vampires enter the battlefield under your control, you can create a blood token. We've seen the blood tokens. You sacrifice them. You discard to draw. They're a nice little artifact. Gets you some nice looting value. You can pay 2 with Ange and sacrifice another creature or a blood token, and each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Now, this isn't the most spectacular sack outlet. It's not the greatest, no, because most of the sack outlets that you want are for free. There's that Rakdos Commander from a few years ago that basically you can pay 2 mana, I think it is, and sacrifice a red creature or a black creature, and if it's red it does something, and if it's black it does something else. One's do 2 damage and the other one's something. I can't remember all the abilities because it's an old commander. But yeah, there's that. So it's a little bit reminiscent of that, but you're sacrificing these artifacts as well, or these blood tokens specifically, and whenever a vampire, basically enters the battlefield under your control, you create the blood token so you can, have this very easy sort of, sacrifice synergy going on. So, for a commander, I think that this is purely a sacrifice aristocrat style commander. Not that there's, none of those. There's not that many Rakdos ones, really, some of the Rakdos vampire, decks, and this is mostly going to be vampire based, I would say, because you care about vampires and whatnot to make those blood tokens, which are the extra kind of gravy that kind of drives this boat, where you need those other effects so that you can, get additional value. I don't know whether you're really using the sacrifice, ability on this. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. Maybe you can close out some games. Maybe you can get rid of some creatures that your opponents have that you don't really want them to have here and there. The gaining life isn't too bad. Overall, I'm not super blown away by this commander, but it's not terrible. I can see some people maybe wanting to build a deck with it, but it's just not the most powerful one. So I don't know. It could certainly go into some sacrifice-based decks, but I don't really see much other place for it. Next, Dorthra, Vengeful Victim. An Azorius Commander, 2 mana for a 4/4 flying. Those are some decent stats. When it attacks or blocks, we sacrifice it at the end of the combat. But then it actually transforms into an aura, which is interesting that it's not a legendary aura. I just don't understand why it's not a legendary aura, but I don't understand anyway. And it enchants a creature. Whenever the creature attacks, we create a 4/4 spirit creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking, and we sacrifice that token at the end of combat. So it's basically Blessing of Saint Traft. It's Geist of Saint Traft on an aura. The creature that we're getting, our quote-unquote commander in this case, is one of these 4/4 flyers in theory. At least this one has the ability, unlike the last Azorius Commander, which was how am I ever getting it into the graveyard? At least this one is at least whenever I attack or block or whatever, it sacrifices itself, and then I can put this aura onto something by its disturb cost. So, yeah, that's not too bad, but when it's your commander, to me that just like screams problem, because this now isn't your commander. It's just a buff that this random aura is giving you, but it's still your commander in a weird way and whatnot. So it's so silly to me to think about this card being a commander that I just don't really see it. Like it's much better than one of the last ones, but at the same point, I still don't see any place for this. I just don't. I cannot see anyone wanting to build a deck around this, 2-mana 4/4 that dies as soon as it attacks or blocks. And then you get this random aura, like Geist of Saint Trapped isn't played, like Blessing of Saint Trapped isn't played very much. So I just don't see this being played at all, unfortunately. Don't think it's powerful enough. Next, we've got Edgar Charmed Groom, the 4-mana Orzhov commander. He gives our other vampires +1/+1. When he dies, we return him to the battlefield transformed as a coffin, as Edgar's coffin. So, at the beginning of our upkeep, we create a 1/1 black vampire creature token with lifelink, black and white vampire, and put a bloodline counter on it. And when it has 3 or more counters on it, we remove those counters and transform it back into its normal face form. So a 4/4 for 4, that's not bad stats. It's giving everything else a buff. Like these 4-mana lords, typically most people don't play too many 4-mana lords. As a commander, I really can't see it doing a whole lot. If you can find, in standard and in modern and in other formats that you can actually have 2 or 3 of these out at a time or whatever, that's fine because you don't really care. As soon as one flips into Edgar Charmed Groom, you flip the other one into the coffin and you start making these 1/1s which are getting buffed by the other side of this card. But in Commander, it's a lot more difficult. How are you going to copy the enchantment, or how are you going to copy the front side, because you can't copy the back side, you can't keep flipping them and repeating the value and all that sort of stuff. So you'll get this slow grind. As a commander, I don't want ever my commander to be gone and not accessible to me, or the thing I want my commander to be doing, I don't want it to be inaccessible to me. So if I want a 4/4 that's giving all my other creatures +1/+1, I don't want this coffin, or if I have this coffin, I don't want to have to worry about it flipping back over to the other side and being Edgar. There are some things that you could do to stop it flipping from the coffin side to Edgar, but there's not much you can do from, stopping your Edgar from dying. It's going to die sometimes. Yeah, sure, you can play the Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Butch, you can play all the things that give him indestructible or whatever, but still, there's still times that he's still going to die, so you're going to get people, making you sacrifice him, making all your creatures -5 or -10 or whatever. Things like that. So I don't know. As a commander, it's way less powerful than the last deck. And not that it has to be as powerful as that, but I still just find that this one is a little bit too underpowered. Maybe that's for standard reasons. Again, some of these cards, I think, they're built more for standard. They're not built for our format and the power level that we're at. Even the more janky cards, you can not really find that many more homes for them in those janky decks. I don't think so. I just don't know. This could be decent. It's not terrible, of course, but it's just not quite there as a commander. I think, of course, if you're just playing it for, generic value or whatever in a vampire deck, I don't know. It's a pretty decent, maybe aristocrat style deck, but there's so many goddamn Orzhov aristocrat style decks, so it's just well, I'd like to see something else. There's not that many Orzhov vampire decks. This could be the face of a Orzhov vampire deck. Maybe it just goes into the proper Edgar Markov deck. I don't know. People will definitely find places for this. I just don't see it being a very popular. Next, Eldritch Tormented Prophet, 3 mana, 2/4. If you draw a card, instead you exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play those cards this turn. This is interesting to me because it's a non-bow with a lot of other things like Niv Mizzet Perun and things like that. Those would be like the typical things. It sounds like it's really good to draw extra cards because you're getting even more cards. But, you know, with Niv Mizzet, you want to draw cards. With this, you're exiling them instead, so you don't get those triggers with any of the Niv Mizzets or anything like Psychosis Crawler. That's another one that, or whatever it is, the jellyfish dude or whatever he is, that he makes tentacles whenever you draw cards. But with this, you're not drawing cards, you're exiling cards. It even includes your upkeep, or not your upkeep, your draw step rather. So you exile 2 cards and you draw step. So it's kind of like a Phyrexian Arena giving you access to an additional card, but it is whenever or if you would draw a card. So if you put all of these card draw style effects in, you're going to be able to exile these cards. You want a lot of cheap cards, I think, with a deck like this, because if you have the time at which you play a spell to draw cards or to do whatever, and then exile 2 cards that you can't play, then that's the worst. It's like, well, what am I doing with these cards now? So I can see this being a very powerful commander because you just run a lot of cheap like cantrips and things like that just to keep drawing cards and exiling cards so that you can play more cards, to exile more cards, to cast more cards. Like things like Bergie and whatever the Stormkin Artist or whatever it is from Strixhaven would be really good for this commander, because you're just like netting mana very quickly so that you can keep paying for spells, keep casting spells, keep exiling spells, keep casting spells. So this seems like a very like spiky Storm style commander where you're just trying to, exile as many things as you can all at once, try and sort of storm off, combo off somehow, and win the game. So it's certainly going to whiff a lot of times, I'm sure. But again, it seems quite strong if you can build around it in the right way. There are a few things that are in red that care about exiling stuff and whatnot. There's not that many things in blue, but like with this, I guess you don't really care. You just like running those blue things so that you can have counter spells and whatnot, so that you can protect your combos and whatnot, all that stuff. That's mostly what these blue like combo style decks do. They don't really care that much that they're running blue. Like they're not running very many blue things. They're only running, like counter spells and whatnot, that sort of stuff. So I could definitely see that this could be a very powerful commander. The problem is it going to be a bit too powerful? But then again, I just think it can whiff so easily and so hard. And the thing is, there's no like other payoffs. Like if you do whiff, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now I've just got to wait, another turn cycle to try to get back to my turn and try to storm off again. So again, it's very like hit and miss, like a lot of like Storm can be at times. It can be like, oh, I just kill everyone. Cool, right, game's over. Like after you've had your, 3-hour turn or whatever. But still, like, like on that turn, you still like, cool, I killed everyone, or whatnot, so the game's over. But again, you could just be like, digging, and then like hit 2 lands or whatever, or even like just hit 2 lands immediately and be like, oh, okay, well, that's the end of that then, like, or whatever. So you probably want a very low land count with this. So again, you just like want to run as many like cheap things like mana rocks and things like that, especially like 0 mana, 1 mana, like, or things that basically net you mana. Like you just want to storm off and win with this. That's what I see. So again, yeah, I see this being like maybe it's top tier. I don't know. I'm not like an expert in that stuff, but I definitely think that you can build this in a very powerful way. And I don't know whether you can like build it in any other way. It's either going to go off like a powder keg, or it's not going to do anything. And that's like the high risk and high reward thing, I guess. So yeah, that's where I think this lies. All right, next Geralf Visionary Stitcher, 3 mana. zombie human wizard. Zombies you control have flying. We just got another thing that gave our zombies flying, but more flying. Sure. He's a 1/4. We pay one, sacrifice another non-token creature. We create an XX blue zombie creature token where X is the sacrifice creature's toughness. Look, there are some things that you can do with this, but in mono blue, I don't really think that there's that much because most of them involve black cards like Gravecrawler and things like that. You sack Gravecrawler and you bring it back. You drain people. You use all your sacrificing and aristocrat stuff and things like that to keep the loops going. If you can find ways to untap this, like Intruder Alarm, things like that, then it's great because you can just keep, as long as you've got blue mana, you can keep sacrificing things to drain, to reanimate, to do all this stuff and whatnot. So, yeah, there are things that can be done with it, but again, I just think making one token is bad. Like, the other Geezer, the old Geezer, that made a whole bunch of zombies equal to a creature's power or toughness or whatever it was a lot better than this. And that sees, like minimal play. Like, not that there's no decks, but I just expect that this will see less play for that ability as a commander, especially because it's like, well, how many blue, like, zombie or, like, sacrifice or whatnot and whatnot decks are there? Not very many. And how many times are you going to be like, okay, I activate this 1/4 of, the turns that are in the game. How good is that? And how many payoffs are there? Probably not very many. So I strictly see this going into the 99 of some zombie decks, mainly because of the ability to give your zombies flying. That's the only real relevant part of the text here, in my opinion. The sacrificing stuff to make something bigger, or whatever to back something that's basically the same cost. Like, it can save stuff from exile or whatnot, removal, things like that. But I don't know. I just think that that's a fringe benefit, and maybe it'll happen once in a blue moon. Yeah, sure, that's fine. But again, like, the most that you get out of this card is 3 mana, give your zombies flying. It's not a zombie, so I don't know how many exactly zombie decks are going to run it, because people are going to go, well, it's not a zombie, and it's, it helps my zombies, but it's not a zombie. So, do I actually want it in my zombie deck? So, yeah, there are those little things that some people often consider for this. So, unfortunately, I think it's not going to see much play out there. Next, Gnork, the Omnivore, 4 mana frog, 3/3. Whenever a frog you control attacks, you mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent card is put in your graveyard from your library, exile it with a croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with croak counters on them. So, obviously, it's Frog Tribal. 100%, nothing else. Frog Tribal all the way. There's like 5 frogs or whatever, maybe 16 frogs. Probably 5 of them are good. Yeah, but Frog Tribal, 100%. Definitely not you mill cards by other means, and just like Muldrotha, you play them and whatnot, and continue to mill yourself and get more value out of your graveyard. So yeah, that's where I think this deck is at. You basically play your Seder Wayfinders, you play, all of these things. There was that frog in, I think it was a frog, or was it a slug in the last set that whenever you mill a land or whatever it is, I think it does something, or you draw a card or something like that. I think that's what it was. I don't remember. It's been so long, even though it was only like a couple of weeks ago or whatever, really. But still, it's like very similar to that. I think they're both like best friends, in my opinion. Like, they go well together because you're gonna like exile any whatever permanents, and then when you mill them, you're also going to draw cards or whatever he does, blah blah blah, whatever the other one does. So there's this Simic graveyard lands or graveyard stuff matters deck that I could see with this, but I don't know. I'm kind of hard to see that this is its own commander. Maybe some people will try to build some sort of Simic graveyard deck, maybe, but you know, I think that this is a card that a lot of people are just going to go, well, I'll put it in my Muldrotha deck, and it's going to be really good in my Muldrotha deck because when my Muldrotha is shut down or it's too much mana, I can still keep milling stuff and exiling stuff and playing stuff with, this guy. So I don't know, it's maybe a backup Muldrotha in that deck. So I just see it like going into a Muldrotha deck. If it wasn't in the same colours, then I think it would see much more play and be much more interesting as a commander on its own. But since it's in the same colours as Muldrotha, I don't think that many people, or as many people as would have played it, will play it as a commander. Maybe some people will just be like, well, I don't want to play Muldrotha because Muldrotha's too easy, or whatnot, whatever. It's become, all the decks are basically the same. But again, you're basically going to play the same cards with this, except you're cutting out black. So, yeah, you might have to make some decisions on some other stuff or whatnot. But then I don't think there's that much in there that you would need to change. So, yeah, I just don't see that this is going to be that popular. It might be more popular than what I think, but maybe some people will just want to play janky frogs. I don't know. The 5 frogs that are really good, and then the rest, 11 frogs that exist and have, some text on them and parent updates and whatnot, and that's about it. I don't know. But to me, I don't know. It's just one of those cards that's just sort of unfortunately in the wrong colours, I think, for it to be really good, because it's in Muldrotha's colours, so I just think it falls into that deck too easily. Now, Helena and Elena partners, a Gruul commander, 4 mana, 2/3, first strike, reach. Okay. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a X +1/+1 counters on another target creature we control, where X is this creature's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn. So it's another sort of Gruul stompy deck that I think, is very much like, what's his name from Theros, whatever his name is, the god. I can't remember his name now, I just was thinking about it. But yeah, it's very much like that, where you're just putting some big beater into play that doesn't have haste or whatever, whatnot, giving it some counters, whatever, that's fine. The counters, instead of just buff until end of turn or whatever, is maybe relevant because it keeps the counters throughout the rest of the game. And, the first turn of haste is important, sure, definitely. But after that, maybe the counters are enough. So I strictly see this as, it's just thought of it, Xenagos. I see it as a, semi-Xenagos card. Unfortunately, this is a lot more susceptible to removal, because Xenagos is mostly an enchantment and indestructible. So, I don't know, the buff, the 1-turn buff, the fact that it goes away and this just keeps counters, I don't think that that's big enough. Maybe this goes in Xenagos, as a backup Xenagos, but then again, Xenagos never goes away. Seriously, it never goes away. So I'm just it's so hard to see that this will be a commander. I really want this to be a cool commander or whatnot. Do something different, do something interesting, give Gruul something to do that, you want to do. You want to go, cool, I'll build around this. That's what I want for any commander, really, anyway. But still, it's just, nah. It doesn't do anything super duper impressive or impactful. You could give something with this and Xenagos out. You could give it X counters, where X is her power, which is often going to be 2. If you have Xenagos out and can give something +X, or give her +X, and then give the next creature plus, X with this, counters, that sounds kind of interesting, because, it's much more effective at, giving more counters, and the counters will stay. So you really need those 2 cards to combo together. So I just don't see that that's ever going to happen. How are you going to get both of these cards out at the same time to actually have that going on? It's just not going to happen unless you're in Jund or something like that where you've got a lot of tutors. Like, yeah, there's some tutors that are in green for creatures, and there's like one that's in red, one or two that's in red, but yeah, I just don't see this being that good and that playable. I just don't see what you can do with it. Next, Helinker Domrathi. 4 mana, vampire. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you choose one that has been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature, you draw a card, lose 1 life, or you transform her. And then she transforms into a Flying Death Touch lifelink 3/4, and then you can pay 3, and each creature you control with Flying Death Touch or lifelink gets +1/+0 until end of turn. A 1/3 flyer for 4 is a little bit undercosted. When you go to your combat or whatever, you can basically choose everyone to sacrifice a creature or draw a card or transform her. I think, in my opinion, none of these are that good. Like, the transform might be the best one, but then you lose out on getting counters or, drawing a card or whatever, or making everyone sacrifice something. So those are nice little things, but I don't think they add up to a lot. 4 mana Phyrexian Arena for 1 turn isn't that good. Or even if it's on that turn, it's still, to me. And then sacrifice for 4 mana, not that good. You transforming it just into a 3/4. Yeah, it has Flying Death Touch lifelink, but stats aren't everything. And then you can pay 3 to give everything that's got Death Touch Flying lifelink +1/+0. Like, that's a nice small buff, but it's too much mana for that buff, in my opinion. Will some people try to build around this? Maybe. It's a vampire, so maybe people will throw it into a vampire deck if they don't have anything better and they just want some random flyer, or they have some sacrifice synergies or whatever. Maybe they'll care about some of the things that this is doing, but there's just too many other things that are way better than this. So I just don't see it, unfortunately, at the head of its own deck. Like, there's so many other mono black commanders that do way more than this. It's unfortunate because the thing is, it's always the way. If it's not busted and broken, or you can't do something really cool or amazing with it, it just gets forgotten. And this is one of those cards that I just think will be forgotten. It's got some decent stats when it's flipped over. Its own ability makes it a 4/4, which isn't too bad. But, again, it's just kind of irrelevant at a certain point. If this is your commander, is the backside your commander, actually? I don't know. I think it probably is. So, is there anything you can do with that? I just don't think there is. So, it's just, I don't know. There's hoops to jump through, but there's not enough payoff for those hoops. So, yeah. Next, Jacob Harken Inspector. 2 mana, 0/2. Tap him, draw a card. Then exile a card from your hand face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may pay 6, 4 and 2 blue. If you do, you transform him. And then he's an enchantment. And this one's a legendary enchantment, so why couldn't the last one be a legendary? Doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. Once each turn, you may play land and cast a spell from among the cards exiled with it without playing their mana cost. So it's kind of a small omniscience, but only for the cards that you've exiled with it. So it's a lot of mana to get to, the 6 and transform. Then you can, omniscience one thing, one land and one actual permanent from this every single turn. It's not terrible, but I just don't see it. I don't this is an interesting looter in a sense. It gives you access to another card that you can cast, but I don't know. To me, like, as a commander, first and foremost, because that's what we always try to do. Like, where's the payoff? Yeah, sure, I can cast a spell, that I've exiled with this guy on the fun side. Unless it's something like cheap, like a nice little cantrip or whatever, like, it's not likely that I'm going to be able to cast it because I'm going to be trying to cast all the other stuff that I want to or need to cast that's actually in my hand. So I don't see that working. Like, once you get to Omniscience one thing, how many things are you going to have exiled with this? Like, how many options are you going to have? Like, then it's nice to have some big stuff. So, I don't know. But then it's just like, you only get to cast one thing? I don't know. If you can find ways to copy this enchantment, then it's not that bad. But again, it's a legendary, so it's going to be hard. You're going to have to send your commander back to the command zone, and then they're different objects, so you've exiled a whole bunch of cards for nothing, or whatnot. I don't know, but again, I just don't know. It's so hard to figure out what to do with this. And as a commander, I just don't see it. I don't see that there's many decks that really would care about this whole stuff. Like the last commander that we were talking about, the Izzet commander, maybe this goes into that deck because you're exiling stuff and you can play stuff with exile and things like that. Like, maybe, but that would help some of that out. I don't know. It would be interesting, at least in that regard. But again, there's not enough homes for this, and to me, the payoff isn't enough. Like, if you are able to, even if it said that you can pay these cards with a mana of any color, or you can, cast, I don't know, some them at a somewhat reduced cost or something, then that would be great. Because then I can cast 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever number of spells I want. The fact that I'm restricted to one spell every time with this is just not. It kills it. It's just not nearly good enough. So, and the fact that you've got to wait for it to untap every time to then pay the 6 to do this thing again. No, I just don't see it. Another commander that I don't honestly see much with. Catilda Dawnheart Mater. 2 double white, star. It's flying lifelink protection for vampires, if that's ever relevant. Its power and toughness are equal to each of the number of permanent cards that we control are spirits and or enchantments. And then it's a enchantment on the other side, and this one's also a legendary. Again, I just don't understand why the other one wasn't a legendary. You enchant a creature, it gets flying, essentially the same thing. Flying lifelink protection for vampires, +X, where X is the number of permanents you control that are spirits and enchantments. This is an interesting card, maybe for that spirit tribal deck. In my opinion, I'm already going past this being a commander, because the only thing that you can do with this being a commander is try and Voltron with this commander, because, what else are you going to do with this? It's getting big and buff. Yes, it cares that you've got a few other spirits or whatnot on the battlefield or enchantments, but you just play a lot of enchantments that so happen to make spirits and whatnot, things like that. Mono white is probably one of the worst colors in Magic, as we all know, even though I said it's a little bit underrated here and there, and it's actually got good ramp, unlike what people think. But again, there's just only so much that you can do with this. And there's just not enough. There is some support, but there's not enough. There's not a bunch of cards that they just printed for white that would help this. So I strictly see this going into spirits, going into a, maybe Enchantment Matters commander, but it doesn't do anything for enchantment matters that much except for the back half. And then are you going to wait, until you've got this in the graveyard to disturb it and then enchant one thing? Then I think that this becomes like a real Voltron card. If you've got a Voltron commander, maybe you want this to buff up your commander for the number of auras and enchantments that you've got, which isn't too bad, but it is a bit overcosted and whatnot for what you have to, all the hoops you have to jump through, but maybe there's a way you can still do it. But again, I don't know. I just don't see this as a commander because I don't see that there's enough enchantment-based support in mono white. So then you've got to look at it, what else you can do with it. So yeah, I just don't see that many decks will need this card. A lot of the Aura decks, Voltron decks that would want it, are already pretty well off and don't really need a card like this. Maybe some like jank decks, like people just like, oh, I happen to have it or whatever, I just want to throw it in and I just want to throw it together and this is fine and fair enough. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah. But again, like beyond that, it's like, sorry. Unfortunately, that's how it is though. Next, Odric, Blood Cursed. 3 mana, Boros. This is interesting. Vampire Soldier, so he got turned. When Odric Blood Cursed, ETBs we create X blood tokens where X is the number of abilities from among flying, first strike, double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, vigilance, found among any creatures we control. So the problem here is that he's 3 mana. That's the main problem. That, like, if he was like 4 or 5 mana, in my opinion, it'd be a bit better because how aggro are you going to be able to like be when you like put in like some of these like keyword soup cards into a deck? Honestly, not very. Like, there's not that many like things that are 1 to 2 mana. Like, there is some, but like you want as many as possible, and the more keywords you have, often the more mana you've got to look at. Maybe now you can like play Odric Tribal, you can play all 3 Odrics. That might be interesting to a degree. Most of them kind of work together and work well with each other because the other Odric gives all your creatures all keywords. If you could find a way to actually make this enter the battlefield on your combat or on a combat, then it's pretty good because it'll see everything has every ability that you basically have. So, you can create a lot of blood tokens. I don't know how relevant these blood tokens are going to be for this commander, though. That's the problem. Like, this is meant to be caring about keyword soup or whatever, but now you're making these random blood tokens. What for? Like, just to loot away lands or loot away creatures into your graveyard? What for? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are you doing with these blood tokens? Like, unless you can turn them into mana rocks or something? I don't know. Like, there's just so many little things. Like, when you say this commander is a graveyard commander or whatnot, then the blood tokens make sense, right? It makes sense for you to have these blood tokens or whatnot, or try to put them in your deck. With this, it just does not make sense. Like, maybe you could put it in Osgear, but then what? Like, you're getting mainly 1 or 2 blood tokens, and it really doesn't care about them because you sacrifice them and then they're gone. You can loot away some stuff, but still, there's easier ways to get stuff in your graveyard than that, so I just don't see it. Like, where can this find a home? I don't see it being that good of a commander. Like, again, yes, you can do the keyword soup thing, but this thing, you really want to cast it late because then at that point you'll actually have a number of these like keywords on your field, so you actually get a decent number of these blood tokens. I don't know. But then what are you doing with the blood tokens? Like, just to loot away lands? Again, it doesn't make sense for what this deck does. If it revived things with, like, keywords or something like that, then you could see why you're making these blood tokens. There'd be a reason for it. There's no real reason for it, so I just don't see it. Like, maybe it's like for stand purposes. Maybe they wanted to give blood tokens another color pairing or whatnot to go into for that, but Old Rotstein is next. 4 mana, human peasant, Golgari. When he enters the battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card. If a land is milled this way, you would create a treasure token. If a creature card is milled this way, we create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If a non-creature non-land is milled this way, we create a blood token. Now this is a decent commander. It's not the best commander, no. It's not Merrin, but I think it's really good because the thing with Merrin is often getting started. Like getting those things into grave because you want to play your commander on 4, so you're often playing all this ramp stuff prior to like what you're doing. So you play your Sakura Tribe Elders and things like this. You want to get things in the graveyard so that you can, especially things that sack with Merrin. But again, you want to get these things in the graveyard so that you can like play your Merrin, immediately get something back, even with 0 counters or whatnot. And then start, milling more things. Like this sets you up really well for a Merrin later that might be in your deck. But again, if Merrin is your commander, this can be a really great card because it comes in before Merrin can mill you some cards, whatnot. And then you can get your Merrin out and start doing things. Same with Muldrotha. It's much better with Muldrotha because again, it's 3 mana. But again, unfortunately, maybe there are some people that want to build a Golgari based like graveyard mill. Like there's old Stick Fingers and whatnot, and cards like that. There's the Izoni Thousand-Eyed. There are some commanders that are out there that are in these colours that might want to play with this card. There are some cards that would benefit from this card, being in their colours. I don't know how good this will be as a commander. But as a card in the 99 of a lot of other popular commanders, oh boy, this has got some space, buddy. This can go in a lot of decks, can see a lot of play, and I think it's really cool in that regard. But just unfortunately, I just don't see it being as popular or as built as any of those other commanders. So I think it'll go under the radar in this set as a built commander. Oh boy, it's Olivia time. This is actually probably my favorite card from this set as far as legends. 6 mana, 4 Rakdos, flying and haste. When she attacks, you return a target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile it. This is the commander that I'm building around right now, actually. I've just proxied a deck and just sort of thrown things together myself. This is a really cool commander. This is a really great commander. Like, there's not very much else that's really doing this in Rakdos. Like, you can go semi-vampire tribal, if you want. But, I've just gone with big stuff that has trample or flying or whatnot, or has some sort of maybe downside or something that you have to get around to casting it or whatnot. Some other thing that, maybe it's not that amazing, but still it exists and it does something, and, that's good enough when you're cheating it out with this. So it's all about cheating stuff out, I think. You could play Ilhag the Razeboar in this deck and do a lot of cheating stuff from hand and whatnot. So I think this is a really cool commander and whatnot. So it's one of those things. It's going to be built around probably pretty heavily by a few people, including yours truly, as I sort of said. Does this go in any other decks, though? That's just the next little thing. So there's not really many Red, Black, X Reanimator decks. There might be a couple like Chainer. You can build Reanimator, like the old Angie. You can build as Reanimator. But honestly, I think this card is just so good that you want to run it as your commander. Like where else are you going to put it in? Maybe you'll put it in Corvold, maybe to reanimate something, but Corvold's just like a combo engine anyway, so does it need something like this? I don't know. There's not that many other decks. Maybe Vampire Tribal you could try putting it in because you're always going to have vampires. Most of your stuff might be legendary, so yeah, it's alright as a reanimator card in that regard. But again, in a lot of vampire decks, a lot of those like Edgar Markov decks are just like playing as many cheap like 1 to 2 mana vampires as what they can to make as many tokens as what they can, and then just flooding the board, killing people with combat damage or sacrifice triggers or whatnot, whatever. So this slow late game card that comes in and is meant to cheat things out that are big and bulky and scary and do something, I just don't think fits a deck that's, like Storm Count 21 on turn 3, or Vampire Storm Count 23 on turn 3. So, I just don't see it like that. I see this as a nice, cool value commander, and whatnot. You discard cards and have all these discard synergies to try to put things in your graveyard so that you can, put Olivia out and then immediately pull something back from your graveyard and start cracking in there. So, yeah, I just see this as a cool commander that you build around itself. I don't really see that it'll fit in any other deck. Next is Bruno Storm Kirk. 3 mana, legendary vampire, enters the battlefield. We put 1 target creature card from our graveyard on top of our library. At the beginning of upkeep, we look at the top card. We may reveal it. If its mana value is 6 or greater, we transform him. Into a 3/5 Kraken Horror. And when he attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of another attacking creature. If it's a creature that's a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, Serpent, we create 2 of those tokens instead. So you want to be Krakens, Leviathans, and Octopus, Serpents tribal mostly here. And you want to be in demand. Like, most of the Krakens are blue, so that's, and Octopuses and Leviathans are blue, so, that's okay. The, black's just mostly probably offering you, removal, board wipes, that sort of thing. Blue has some alright board wipes as well, but still, black has some, in my opinion, better ones because they actually get rid of things rather than bouncing them to hand or whatnot, for the most part. So, this seems cool for people who maybe want to build, Sea Monster Tribal. The small hiccup of having to hopefully, get to the point of flipping this is, the main issue. Because you're still going to have to run mana rocks and things like that. And then it's before turn 3, how am I going to get a 6-drop or maybe a 6-drop into my graveyard or whatnot? So that poses a small problem, but it's nothing that you can't completely build around, but it's just that will be one of the big deck building problems. So you really want to find ways to get things in the graveyard very quickly, or at least big things in the graveyard really quickly, and then be able to flip this as quickly as possible so that you can... And then you also want to, play things probably with haste, so you want some Lightning Greaves and things like that in this deck so that you can start getting those token copies right away. So yeah, I just think that there's some build around with this. Not that it's insurmountable, but I do think that you do have to work around with this, and that's kind of cool because, I prefer commanders that you go, okay, cool, right, what do I do with this? Okay, how do I actually do that? And how can I be successful? This is kind of a cool thing that my commander can do. Maybe you don't really care, you just want to run things and clone things. But, if you're running a lot of these sea monsters, you just get extra upside. So maybe you don't really care. A lot of sea monsters aren't really that good. So, I don't know. There's funny things and interesting things you can do with that, but still, is the more optimal thing just to be alright, I'll play all these big things that I just happen to want to get an extra copy of or whatnot. So, yeah, is this an interesting concept to try to figure out. Next, Tauren's Fist of the Angels, Celeznia Commander, 3 mana, 2/2 training. So it's the reverse of Mentor, essentially. When it attacks and there's a creature that has more power than it, it gets a counter. Whenever you cast a creature spell, we create a 1/1 green and white human creature token with training. That's fine. I think that of this as purely a token-based command deck. There's a lot of Celeznia-based token commander decks, this is an alright one as well. So I don't think you really care about the training, don't worry about that. If you get it, you get it. You just want to flood the board with a lot of these 1/1s. You just want to keep casting creatures, drawing cards with other effects and whatnot, things like that. Maybe you could go semi-human tribal, doesn't really matter. You're just like, want to keep creating tokens and tokens and tokens. Adeline will be pretty good for this deck, just keeping making more tokens and whatnot. So you're just going to want to flood the board and run over people with all your tokens. Pretty simple commander, pretty easy commander, nice commander, all right to build around. Yeah, I would recommend. I don't know how many other commanders you could go into, but there's certainly a lot of Celeznia or Celeznia plus X commanders or green-white X commanders that you could put this in, that maybe want a token generator and whatnot. It's not too bad, so I think that it could have some places in some other decks if you're doing token stuff. As its own commander, I just see, fine, fair enough. If you happen to pick this up, might be pretty cheap. You want to build a cheap token deck, cheap humans deck, whatever. Yep, this seems pretty good. And if you ever get the training, don't worry about the training. Just think, if I ever get it, it's a nice little upside. Just so happen to got it. All right. The last one here for today, Tox Rule the Corrosive. 7 mana. Alright, we're out, boys. Slug Horror, but at the beginning of each end step, you put a slime counter each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get neg 1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter dies, we create a 1/1 slug creature token. We can sacrifice a slug to draw a card. The problem with this is, as I sort of said, it's 7 mana. So, that kind of kills it. But, Dorthra is a thing. Dorthra is a thing, and, we know that these slower commanders can do something. But you really have to be heavily on that controlling aspect. You really want to... the only way these creatures get neg 1 is for the slime counters. There is some proliferate and whatnot that you can do in these colors, not as much as what green has. So, I think you're going to be hard-pressed for this commander to do a lot. Specifically, you really want to find ways to make this a lot cheaper, get some insane rituals going off so that you can get this thing out quickly and effectively start, slowing people down, killing their stuff, making slugs, and then, maybe you'll sacrifice some slugs to draw cards. My thing is, how does this deck win? Because that's the problem with a lot of these control or slower commanders, whatnot. Maybe this is a card that was built for standard or whatnot, or built for other formats. It wasn't really built with our format 100% in mind. But again, whenever there's a legendary, we've always got to look at it for these purposes, because that's our format. This is what we play. So again, when we're looking at it, what can we actually do with this? And that's the thing. It's not that it's not sweet or not cool. It's that it's just too much. And maybe the stats of this thing are also part of that. If this was like a 2/2 or whatever, something like that, minor stats, then this just wouldn't be as expensive. It doesn't need to be this expensive. That's the thing. So I just don't know how we can find a way to make this commander good as a commander, or in the 99. Again, it's just too slow, in my opinion, to really do very much. Sure, it can slow down your opponents, but again, your opponents have probably already almost won, if they've not already won by the time that you're getting this guy out there. 7 mana's where, people are winning the game, and then you're going to cast a 7 mana thing that just gives everything -1/-1 at the beginning of your end step. Sure. You know, like, sure. You know, but anyway, that's just how I see it, unfortunately. But again, as I said, that is it for the set. For, you know, all the legendaries. There are some interesting cards that are specific to the bundles and to the set boosters and whatnot. I'll do a separate little thing maybe for them at some point, but wait and see how we're going, because I've still got the set reviews to do, or the best set cards from the set to do. And yeah, I've got a lot of other stuff to do, so it's not just like just doing that. So wait and see where we're at. But anyway, guys, you can let me know what you think about all of these cards. Which ones piqued your interest? Was I, you know, completely telling you that the one that you were so super hyped about and so super interested in was lots of poop, or was the one that, you know, I was, you know, hyped for, the one that you thought was super poop? Let me know your thoughts. Write them down there in the comments below. Be sure to try to respond to everyone and anyone. Do try to do that, and love interacting with all you guys, talking about all of these geeky things that I love to talk about. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one, or down there in the comments below. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?